Welcome to a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, a horrifying tale that delves into the darkest corners of the human soul. This is a journey deep into fear and obsession, a chain of events that shook an entire nation. Before we begin, if you're someone who loves detective stories, chilling crimes, and unsolved mysteries, make sure you've subscribed to our channel so you won't miss any of the gripping stories to come. Your support is the driving force that allows us to continue bringing you the highest quality content. Now, let us step together into the darkness, where a killer once spread terror and left scars that could never be erased. Prepare yourself because this story is not for the faint of heart. The city of Oakhaven, Massachusetts, had always prided itself on its quiet, colonial charm, a picturesque blend of historic brick buildings and leafy suburban streets. It was a place where generations grew up, where community was a tangible thing, and where, until now, the greatest scandal might have been a contested zoning permit. That illusion of tranquility shattered on a cold, rain-slicked Tuesday in late October, when the body of Eleanor Vance, a beloved retired schoolteacher, was discovered in her meticulously kept Victorian home. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose face carried the subtle etchings of 2 decades in law enforcement, stood in Eleanor's living room, the scent of antiseptic and something far more primal stinging his nostrils. The house, usually a beacon of warmth and a testament to Eleanor's passion for antiquing, felt frigid, violated. Eleanor lay sprawled on her Persian rug, her eyes wide, staring at a ceiling she would never see again. There was no sign of forced entry, no struggle. It was eerily quiet, save for the rhythmic clicking of forensics cameras and the hushed, urgent whispers of his team. "No, Miles, not peaceful," remarked Detective Sarah Chan, his younger, sharper partner, her gaze fixed on the victim's hands. "Look closer." Chan, a former psychologist, possessed an unnerving ability to read beyond the obvious, to find the subtle discord in a seemingly harmonious scene. She knelt, gloved hands hovering over Eleanor's. Her hands aren't clenched in defensive posturing. They're arranged, almost carefully placed, palms up, fingers slightly curled. Corbin squinted, leaning in. Indeed, the hands, delicate and age-spotted, seemed to cradle an invisible offering. It was a detail that unnerved him, a deliberate act amidst the violence. Eleanor Vance, a woman known for her kindness and impeccable manners, had been strangled. The ligature marks were precise, almost surgical, leaving little bruising beyond the immediate area. It spoke of control, not brute force. The killer hadn't merely taken a life. They had choreographed a death. The initial hours spiraled into days of frantic investigation. Oakhaven's small police department, accustomed to petty theft and neighborhood disputes, found itself plunged into the abyss of a homicide. Forensics yielded frustratingly little. No usable fingerprints, no DNA from the scene. The only discernible trace was a faint, almost imperceptible scent of pipe tobacco, which quickly faded and could easily have been Eleanor's late husband's lingering presence. The lack of forced entry suggested Eleanor knew her killer, or at least let them in willingly. But who would she let in, someone capable of such a heinous act? The media, initially hesitant to disrupt Oakhaven's placid image, eventually caught wind of the story. The Oakhaven Strangler became the headline. Local news channels ran tearful interviews with former students and neighbors, painting Eleanor as an angelic figure, making the crime all the more incomprehensible. Fear, a foreign concept in Oakhaven, began to seep into the community. Doors that had always been unlocked were now double-bolted. Evening strolls became brisk dashes home. 2 weeks later, the fear solidified into terror. Arthur Jensen, a respected, if somewhat reclusive local historian, was found dead in his sprawling, book-lined study. Like Eleanor, he had been strangled, the method chillingly similar. And like Eleanor, his hands were meticulously arranged, though this time they rested on an open, leather-bound tome, as if mid-sentence in a silent, final reading. The book was a first edition of The Scarlet Letter, open to a page describing Hester Prynne's public humiliation. "This isn't random," Corbin stated, his voice raspy from lack of sleep, standing over Arthur's body. "It's too specific. The method, the arrangement. It's the same hand at work. Chun nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. And the victims, Miles. Eleanor, the embodiment of community spirit and nurturing. Arthur, the guardian of Oakhaven's past, its intellectual heart. They represent something, don't they? Not just random targets, but symbols. The Oakhaven Police Department was now overwhelmed. The FBI was called in, sending Agent Marcus Thorne, a man with a reputation for cold, analytical brilliance and an equally cold demeanor. Thorne's presence brought resources, but also an air of professional condescension that chafed at Corbin. Detective Corbin, I understand your attachment to this community, Thorne had said in their initial briefing, his voice clipped. But we need to operate without sentimentality. We're looking for patterns, motive, opportunity. What links these two beyond the obvious methodology? Corbin bristled. Their lives, their contributions to Oakhaven. They were pillars. Perhaps that's the link. Someone targeting the very fabric of this town. Thorne merely raised an eyebrow. Or someone who sees them as expendable, a canvas for their own twisted narrative. The FBI profilers developed a preliminary profile. Likely male, highly intelligent, meticulous, deeply disturbed, possibly with a narcissistic need for control and recognition. He was a chameleon, blending into the background, operating with a chilling precision that left few traces. They dubbed him the Weaver, for the careful, almost artistic arrangement of his victims. The name resonated with the public, instilling a deeper, more insidious dread. The city spiraled into a collective state of paranoia. Halloween was canceled. Local businesses suffered as people stayed home. The air grew thick with suspicion. Every shadow held a potential threat, every stranger a potential monster. Corbin felt the weight of the city's fear pressing down on him. He saw it in the eyes of his neighbors, in the frantic calls from parents, in the haunted expressions of his own officers. He had dedicated his life to protecting Oakhaven, and now it was crumbling around him. He often found himself alone in his office late at night, poring over files, the only sound the hum of the fluorescent lights. He'd stare at the victim photos, trying to find a flicker of understanding in their vacant eyes. Eleanor Vance, Arthur Jensen. What did they have in common beyond being upstanding citizens of Oakhaven? No shared social circles, no business dealings, no obvious connection. It was a void, a chilling emptiness that offered no answers. Chun, ever the pragmatist, had started mapping the crime scenes, looking for geographical patterns. Both houses were older, detached, and in quiet residential areas, but in different parts of town. No clear radius, Miles, she reported, frustrated. He's moving around. He knows Oakhaven well, or he's studying it. One evening, as a biting November wind rattled his office window, Corbin noticed something small but significant in the photos of Arthur Jensen's study. On a nearby shelf, partially obscured, was a small, hand-carved wooden bird, a cardinal. It was a common enough decorative item. But then he remembered seeing a similar, though not identical, bird figurine on Eleanor Vance's mantelpiece. He dismissed it at first, a coincidence. But now, coupled with the arranged hands, the specific book, the thought sparked. Sarah, he called, his voice cutting through the silence of the nearly empty station. Come here. Look at these. Chun walked over, her brow already furrowed. Corbin pointed to the bird in Jensen's study, then to a blurry background shot from Vance's living room. Do you see it? A bird. A cardinal in Jensen's, a wren in Vance's. Small, wooden, handcrafted. Chun leaned closer, her eyes scanning the details. It's possible. But it could just be a coincidence, Miles. These are common. Maybe. But what if it's not? What if he's leaving behind little tokens? A signature that's not about the victim, but about his own twisted aesthetic. Corbin's mind raced. And the hands. They're always arranged, right? What if he's weaving a narrative? A story through death. They started cross-referencing antique shops, local artisans, anything that might link such specific handcrafted items. The search was a monumental task in a city full of antique stores and craft fairs, yielding dozens of similar items, but no direct lead. The pressure was immense. The governor had called the mayor, demanding results. The citizens of Oakhaven were terrified, and their fear was turning into anger, directed squarely at the police. One night, Corbin sat at his kitchen table, a half-eaten dinner growing cold in front of him. His wife, Maria, sat opposite him, her face etched with worry. "Miles, you have to eat something. You're going to make yourself sick." He barely heard her. His mind was replaying the crime scenes, the faces of Eleanor and Arthur, the chilling details. He knew, with a gut-wrenching certainty, that the killer would strike again. He felt it in the deepening chill in the air, in the city's palpable dread. The weaver was just beginning his gruesome tapestry, and Oakhaven was his loom. The small wooden birds, the arranged hands, the specific books, these weren't random acts of violence. They were messages carefully placed, waiting to be deciphered. He just hadn't found the Rosetta Stone yet. The threads were there, thin and almost invisible, but he knew they were being woven into a larger, more horrifying design. The quiet town of Oakhaven, once a sanctuary, was now a stage for a predator, and Miles Corbin knew, deep in his bones, that he was racing against time to prevent the final, devastating act of the Weaver's dark symphony. The fear was a living thing now, breathing down their necks, and he had to catch it before it consumed them all. He felt a profound sense of failure, of the city's trust eroding with each passing, fruitless day. The weight was crushing, but it also fueled a grim determination. He wouldn't rest until the Weaver's threads were cut. He wouldn't. The third victim, Martha Jenkins, a vibrant, elderly librarian, was discovered 3 weeks after Arthur Jensen. Her body was found in the Oakhaven Public Library, nestled amongst dusty tomes in the rare books section, a place she cherished. Like the others, she had been strangled, her hands carefully positioned. This time, they rested on a copy of Edgar Allan Poe's Tales of Mystery and Imagination, Open to the Telltale Heart. A small, hand-carved wooden owl, its eyes wide and vacant, perched on the spine of the book. The discovery sent a fresh wave of panic through Oakhaven, but for Corbin and Chun, it was a grim confirmation. 3 victims, 3 arranged scenes, 3 specific literary works, 3 wooden birds, Chen stated, her voice tight with a mixture of horror and grim satisfaction. "This is a serial killer, Miles. He's not just killing, he's communicating. He's leaving us a story." Agent Thorne, now a more permanent fixture in Oakhaven, finally conceded. The Weaver, the moniker fits. He's crafting a narrative, using these individuals as his characters, and the city as his stage. Thorne, however, focused on the lack of a geographical pattern, the varying victim demographics, and the killer's apparent ability to blend seamlessly into any environment. He's fluid, adapting. He doesn't conform to typical profiles. This suggests a high level of intelligence and adaptability. Or he's operating on an internal logic we haven't grasped yet. Corbin's team, now augmented by FBI forensic specialists and profilers, began a deep dive into the victims' lives, not just for common contacts, but for shared themes. Eleanor Vance, the beloved teacher, Arthur Jensen, the keeper of history, Martha Jenkins, the guardian of knowledge. He's targeting people who embody the soul of Oakhaven, Corbin mused, tracing the outline of the city map. The educators, the preservers, the chroniclers. The profiling team, led by Dr. Evelyn Reed, a sharp-witted behavioral analyst from the FBI, began to theorize. He's not just killing, he's curating. He views Oakhaven as a specific entity, perhaps one he feels has strayed from an ideal. These victims represent a perceived decay, or perhaps a purer form of what Oakhaven should be, and he's memorializing them in his own grotesque fashion. Reed suggested the killer might see himself as a moral arbiter, a dark artist correcting a perceived imbalance. The Poe connection in Martha Jenkins's case was particularly potent. The Telltale Heart, a story of guilt, madness, and the obsession with a perceived flaw. Is he trying to tell us something about himself? Chun wondered aloud. Or about Oakhaven? Corbin, remembering the faint scent of pipe tobacco from the first scene, wondered if that was a deliberate misdirection or a genuine, Subtle clue. They started canvassing every tobacco shop, every antique dealer, every craft store in a 100-mile radius. It was a tedious, mind-numbing task, but they were desperate. The wooden birds became a central focus. They were clearly handmade, distinctive in their detail, though varied in species. Corbin brought in a local ornithologist, Dr. Elias Thorne, no relation to Agent Thorne, who specialized in local bird species. Dr. Thorne, a kindly, bespectacled man, identified the birds: a robin, Eleanor; a cardinal, Arthur; and an owl, Martha. These are common local birds, detective, he explained. But the craftsmanship is quite exquisite. A unique style, almost folk art, but with a refined touch. Corbin and Chan spent days sifting through local artisan registries, craft fair vendor lists, and even online forums for woodcarvers. They interviewed dozens of hobbyists, some of whom recognized the style, but none could definitively identify the maker. It was a maddening chase. Meanwhile, the media coverage reached a fever pitch. National news outlets descended on Oakhaven, turning the quiet town into a macabre circus. Local residents formed vigilante groups, patrolling streets, fueled by fear and a sense of helplessness. The police received hundreds of tips daily, most of them useless, some outright malicious. The pressure on Corbin and his team was immense, a constant, suffocating weight. His own family felt the strain. Maria grew withdrawn, constantly checking locks, refusing to leave the house after dark. Corbin found himself increasingly isolated, his sleep haunted by the faces of the victims. He knew the killer was out there, watching, perhaps even relishing the chaos he had wrought. He could almost feel the killer's presence, an unseen shadow lurking in the periphery of his awareness. Then came the fourth victim, not in Oakhaven itself, but in a neighboring town, Willow Creek, a smaller, equally picturesque community that shared a border with Oakhaven. This time, the victim was Sarah Peterson, a 30-year-old freelance journalist who had been writing a series of articles about the Oakhaven murders. She was found in her remote cabin, strangled, her hands once again carefully arranged over a laptop displaying a half-written article. On her desk, a small, carved wooden raven, its gaze piercing, stood sentinel. This was a direct message. "He's escalating," Agent Thorne stated, his face grim. "He's leaving Oakhaven, expanding his territory, and he's targeting someone who was actively investigating him. This is a taunt, a challenge." The chosen literature this time was not a physical book, but the very act of reporting on him. And the raven a clear nod to Poe, reinforcing the earlier clue, but also symbolizing death, ill omen, and perhaps the very nature of storytelling. "The raven," Chin mused, connecting the dots. Poe's poem, "Quoth the raven, nevermore." Is he telling us that we'll never catch him? Or that the victims are nevermore? Corbin felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. The killer was becoming bolder, more confident, more personalized. He was no longer just weaving a narrative. He was engaging directly, almost playfully, with his pursuers. The profile was updated. Highly intelligent, possibly with a background in literature or art, with a profound sense of self-importance and a dangerous grandiosity. He was a master manipulator, not just of his victims, but of the investigation itself. The hunt for the woodcarver intensified. They expanded the search, interviewing every known artisan in Massachusetts and even parts of New Hampshire. Finally, a breakthrough. A small, independent art gallery owner in a town 50 miles away, Evelyn Hart, recognized the style from a description and photos. "Oh, yes," she said, her eyes widening as she saw the pictures of the carved birds. "I know this work. Unique, isn't it? Very detailed. A man named Elias Thorne. He used to sell a few pieces here years ago. He moved on, said he found the commercial aspect distracting. He preferred to create in solitude." Corbin's heart pounded. Elias Thorne, the ornithologist, the one they had already spoken to, the kind, bespectacled man who had identified the birds for them. It was a horrifying, brilliant piece of misdirection. They pulled up his file. Elias Thorne, 62, retired ornithologist, specializing in local avian populations. Lived alone in an isolated, rambling house on the outskirts of Oakhaven, bordering a dense wooded area. No criminal record. Widower, his wife had died 5 years ago. He was a respected academic, a quiet, unassuming man who had seamlessly integrated himself into the investigation, offering expert advice while secretly mocking them with his carefully crafted clues. "He's been playing us, Miles," Chin whispered, her face pale. "Right under our noses." He presented himself as an expert, an ally. It's textbook sociopathy. Corbin felt a surge of cold fury. The arrogance, the calculated deception. It was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. "We need to move carefully," he instructed Thorne and Reed. "He knows we're closing in now. He'll anticipate a direct approach. He's been watching us, watching the investigation. He might have a contingency plan." They planned a covert surveillance operation on Elias Thorne's property. The house was a dark silhouette against the moonlit woods, silent and seemingly innocuous. But Corbin knew with a chilling certainty that within those walls, a monstrous mind was at work, perhaps already planning his next, even more audacious, move. The weaver had been weaving his threads not just into his victims, but into the very fabric of the investigation, mocking them, testing them. Now it was their turn to untangle his wicked design, to expose the monster hiding in plain sight. The game had shifted, and the stakes were higher than ever. Corbin felt a grim satisfaction, finally having a name, a face, but also a deep apprehension. Elias Thorne was not just a killer. He was an intellect, a twisted artist. And artists, even dark ones, often had a final, grand performance planned. The surveillance on Elias Thorne's isolated property began under the cloak of a biting December night. The house, an old, rambling Victorian almost swallowed by overgrown trees, exuded a peculiar stillness. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful, but rather held its breath, pregnant with unspoken secrets. Detective Corbin, perched in a hidden observation post deep in the woods, watched the house, a knot of dread and anticipation tightening in his stomach. The man who had sat across from him, offering insights into birds, was now the monster they hunted, the nocturne weaver who had terrorized Oakhaven. Agent Thorne and Dr. Reed established a command center in a discreet van parked a mile down the road. "He hasn't left the house in 2 days," Chun reported via comms, her voice a low murmur. "No visitors, no deliveries, just quiet." "He knows," Corbin stated, his voice flat. "He must." Sarah Peterson's murder was a direct challenge. He probably monitored the news, looking for any shift in our focus, any mention of the birds. Dr. Reed interjected. "His last victim was a journalist investigating him. That's a classic move of an offender feeling cornered or seeking to control the narrative. He's craving recognition, but on his own terms. He won't simply vanish." The waiting was agonizing. Corbin found himself replaying every interaction with Elias Thorne, searching for any tell, any flicker of the monster beneath the mild-mannered academic. Thorne had been so calm, so helpful, so utterly devoid of suspicion. It was a mask meticulously crafted over decades. On the third night of surveillance, a flicker of light appeared in Thorne's attic window. Not a steady light, but a sporadic, rhythmic glow, like someone was working by a small lamp, intermittently switching it off or moving it. "He's carving?" Corbin whispered into his mic, a chill tracing its way down his spine. "He's preparing for his next act." A wave of urgency washed over the team. If he was carving, he was planning. And planning for Elias Thorne meant another victim, another meticulously arranged tableau of death. They had to move. Agent Thorne made the call. "We go in. Covert entry if possible. If not, dynamic." The raid team, a blend of Oakhaven PD and FBI tactical units, moved like ghosts through the snow-dusted woods. Corbin led the Oakhaven contingent, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt a profound personal responsibility to these victims, to his city. They breached the house through a rear window, the silence of the night shattered by the gentle click of a lockpick, then a soft thud as a team member dropped to the floor inside. The house was cold, filled with the musty scent of old paper and wood. As they moved through the lower floors, they found stacks of books, scientific journals, and intricate wood carvings, not just birds, but miniature landscapes, tiny animals, each a masterpiece of detail. It was a museum of his hidden genius. They found Thorn in the attic, just as Corbin had suspected. The space was a cluttered yet organized workshop. A small table lamp illuminated a workbench laden with carving tools, wood shavings, and a partially finished wooden sculpture. It wasn't a bird this time. It was a miniature, incredibly detailed representation of the Oakhaven town square, complete with tiny brick buildings and a meticulously carved bandstand. On the bandstand, resting prominently, was a small, empty wooden pedestal, waiting for its final figure. Elias Thorne stood by the window, silhouetted against the pale glow of the streetlights outside. He wasn't surprised. He merely turned, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. His eyes, behind his spectacles, held a chilling clarity, devoid of fear or remorse. "Detective Corbin," Thorne said, his voice calm, almost cordial. "I had a feeling you'd appreciate my work. You're a man who understands patterns, aren't you? The threads I've been weaving." Corbin, gun raised, felt a cold fury. "Elias, it's over." Thorne chuckled softly. "Is it? Or is it merely the culmination, the final act of a long gestating masterpiece?" He gestured around the attic. "This is where the true narrative takes shape. Oakhaven, my home. So beautiful, so full of potential, yet so unseeing, so complacent." He began to pace slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, as if giving a lecture. Eleanor, Arthur, Martha. They were the heart, the mind, the soul of Oakhaven. Yet, they were also symbols of its quiet decay. Eleanor, teaching a curriculum devoid of true wonder. Arthur, cataloging history without understanding its lessons. Martha, guarding knowledge that few truly sought. And Sarah Peterson? Chun interjected, her voice sharp. "What about her? The journalist reporting on your masterpiece?" Thorne stopped, his gaze falling on the small, empty pedestal on the miniature town square. "Ah, Sarah, a tragic necessity. She sought to sensationalize, to define my art before it was complete. She understood the individual threads, but not the grand tapestry." He sighed, a dramatic, performative exhalation. The final figure for this pedestal was to be Oakhaven itself, a representation of its collective spirit. And I needed to make a statement, a final, undeniable truth about its complacency, before I could sculpt its essence. He picked up a small, exquisitely carved wooden figure from his workbench. It was a figure of a person, genderless, ageless, its head bowed in shame. This was to be the finishing touch. The city, burdened by its own apathy, its inability to see the shadows growing in its midst. Corbin took a step forward. "No more, Elias. Put your hands up." Thorne ignored him. "You see, Detective, Oakhaven was once a place of genuine artistry, of profound thought, but it became mundane. I merely sought to reintroduce a certain gravitas, a sense of consequence. My victims were not merely bodies. They were punctuation marks in a neglected story. The robin, the cardinal, the owl, the raven, each chosen for its symbolism, each guiding you to the next, like breadcrumbs for a starved mind. "You killed innocent people, Elias," Corbin growled. "You're a murderer." "And a curator," Thorne corrected, his eyes gleaming with a manic self-righteousness. "A sculptor of forgotten truths. I've given Oakhaven a story it will never forget. A legacy of introspection, born from terror." Suddenly, Thorne moved, not towards a weapon, but towards a small, innocuous-looking wooden box on a nearby shelf. Corbin and the tactical team reacted instantly, but Thorne was quicker. He didn't pull out a gun. Instead, he hurled the box at the nearest lamp, plunging the attic into near darkness, save for the weak moonlight. "He's going for an escape," Agent Thorne barked over the comms. Secure exits. Chaos erupted. In the brief, disorienting darkness, Thorne managed to slip past the initial perimeter. He knew the house intimately. A frantic search began, room by room, floor by floor. Corbin and Chun split up, their flashlights cutting through the oppressive gloom. Corbin found Thorne in the master bedroom, standing by an open window, a sheer drop to the overgrown garden below. Thorne held something small and glinting in his hand, a carving knife, its blade sharp and polished. "You can't let me finish my work, can you, detective?" Thorne said, his voice laced with a bitter triumph. "You'll always choose order over art, control over consequence." "Your art is murder, Elias," Corbin retorted, his voice strained. "You're a sick man. And you, detective, are merely a cog in the machine," Thorne countered, taking a step onto the window ledge. "You'll catch me, yes, but you won't erase the narrative I've etched into Oakhaven's soul. My tapestry is woven. My nocturne has played." Just as Thorne was about to leap, Chun burst into the room, a flash of movement and a sharp shout. "Elias, don't!" Thorne hesitated, momentarily distracted. That was all Corbin needed. In a swift, desperate lunge, he tackled Thorne, sending both men crashing back into the room. The carving knife clattered to the floor, sliding under a dresser. Thorne fought with unexpected strength, a frantic, animalistic struggle for freedom. But Corbin, fueled by adrenaline and the raw weight of the city's fear, held on, grappling with the twisted artist until other officers rushed in and finally subdued him. Handcuffed and restrained, Thorne looked up at Corbin, his eyes still holding that unsettling calm, that chilling conviction. "The world will remember Oakhaven, detective," he whispered, a final, defiant pronouncement. "And they will remember the Weaver. My legacy is sealed." The arrest of Elias Thorne sent shockwaves through the community. The kindly ornithologist, the respected academic, revealed as the monster who had terrorized them for months. The subsequent investigation uncovered a hidden room in his basement, a shrine to his victims, containing not just more carved birds, but journals filled with his twisted philosophy, his plans, and his self-appointed mission to awaken Oakhaven through fear and death. His wife's death 5 years prior, it turned out, had been the catalyst of deep, unaddressed grief that had festered into a profound delusion, convincing him that the world, particularly his beloved Oakhaven, was decaying, losing its soul, and only he could restore it through his grotesque artistry. Oakhaven slowly began to heal, but the scars remained. The fear might have subsided, but the memory of the Weaver, and the unsettling thought that such darkness could hide behind such an unassuming facade, lingered like a persistent shadow. Corbin and Chen, though hailed as heroes, carried their own burdens. They had stopped the Weaver, but the tapestry of terror he had woven had changed Oakhaven forever, leaving a permanent mark on its quiet, colonial soul. The nocturne had ended, but its haunting melody would forever echo in the heart of the city.